Good afternoon, everyone. We will begin today with the Refuge and Bodhichitta prayers. O Sanje Chedan Soge Chonam La Chancho Bardo Datne Chapsum Je Dage Jen Sogi Besunam Je Drola Penjir Sanje Drobar Sho Sanje Chedan Soge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dane Chapsum Che Dage Jinso Gibe Sunam Je Drola Benjir Sanje Drobar Sho Sanje Chedan Soge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dane Chapsum Che Dage Jinso Gibe Sunam Je Drola Penjir Sanje Drobar Sho Semje Damje Dewa Tan Dewe Judan Dembar Jurje Donga Ji Judan Dralwar Jurje Dongal Mebe Dewa Tamba Tam Mindrawal Jurje Nyeren Shadan Nitan Dralwe Tanyon Shambola Nebra Jurje until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of being generous and so forth, may I become a Buddha to help beings until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of being generous and so forth, may I become a Buddha to help beings until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of being generous and so forth, may I become a Buddha to help beings. In the Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the three times, who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Gurus. Please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. Now think to yourself that we have a really precious opportunity in this short human life to do something truly meaningful. And that the most meaningful thing we can do is to do whatever we can to bring lasting benefit to all, everyone, all other sentient beings and ourselves. And really the most meaningful thing we can do is to bring beings to permanent happiness or Buddhahood. And so think to yourself that it is in order to take a step along that way, if not to go the entire way. In fact, if we have a vaster motivation, the thought that by just doing this and studying the Abhidharma right now that we may achieve Buddhahood, whether or not that's actually going to happen, our motivation will be stronger. And when your motivation is stronger, then the result is more powerful, as we will see in today's text. And so, please have a strong motivation, as strong a motivation as you can, that you want to truly bring benefit to yourself and all other sentient beings. And listen with this motivation of bodhicitta. And the Dharma that you are listening to is the verses on the Treasury of Abhidharma by Vasubandhu, as explained by the Ninth Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje. Of the 8 chapters, we're discussing the 4th, Teachings on Karma. Teachings on Karma has, at the beginning, a brief description of how everything arises from karma. And second, there's a section on the longest section, the majority of the chapter is the section on understanding karma. And then at the end, there is a short summary of teaching teaching the synonyms of various dharmas. And so we're discussing the understanding of karma, and the understanding of karma has 3 parts. There is a presentation of identifying what karma is. Then there is the section talking about the presentation of karma according to the great vehicle. And then finally there's the section on the meaning of karma as explained in the sutras, which again has 2 parts, a general teaching, specific explanations. So we are within the general teachings talking about the classifications of karma in terms of, and there are several different classifications, but to kind of skip down, we're talking about the classification of the karmas and the results, and then as we talk, in terms of their result, in other words, what are they going to produce? And as we speak about that, there are some various points about this, about describing in particular the way karma is experienced. And this is an important topic. And before I get too far into it, first of all, there is one correction I'd like to make on what I said yesterday. Yesterday I said that when we were talking about, we have the 4 types of karma, right? We have the karma that is visibly experienced, karma that is experienced on birth, karma that is experienced in other lifetimes, and the karma that is not definitely experienced. Of these 4 types of karma, I said that in the latter 3 we're primarily talking about propelling karma, karma that propels a rebirth, but that was incorrect. It is talking about both propelling and completing karma. What we're saying is that there's karma that you do, there are actions that you do that are going to ripen on you in this lifetime, either as birth or as some other event in this lifetime. Some that'll ripen in the very next lifetime, or either as birth or as other events, other things that will happen to you in those lifetimes, or in other lifetimes, or where the result is not definite. In other words, when the result is not definite, what we're saying is that if conditions are right, it'll ripen. If they aren't right, it's not going to ripen. Okay, and generally, and so this leads up to a question that we had a question among our studio audience, and I also received a question over email. So this must be a question that more people also have, because when we generally talk about these 4 types of karmas, it's taught kind of that they're kind of decreasing order of intensity. The karma that you're experiencing in this lifetime is at one point, and it's talked about in the auto commentaries being the strongest, and then karma experienced on birth is the next strongest, and so forth. So that's a general teaching. But then there's the problem is that, well, you have the 5 heinous actions, and it seems like there's just probably nothing worse that you could do than the 5 heinous actions. That might be the case in the Great Exposition. It's not necessarily the case in the Mahayana. But in terms of so if there's nothing worse, like if you kill your parents and you fall into, as a result, you're going straight to the incessant hell after you pass away. What could be worse than that? So, so this is an interesting question. And I think the part of the answer we will come to in today's text, where it describes what actually makes a karma definitely experienced, what makes it visibly experienced, what are the qualities of an action that determine what sort of result it's going to have. So that topic will come up today. So in a sense, you can just wait a little bit. But the other thing is that when we're talking about this, in general we say more to greater to lesser, but that is general, and then there are always specifics, which are very, very different. So, the specifics of a particular situation might make it a little bit, might make a difference and make something that is experienced in the next lifetime be stronger in some sense. So, at any rate, we will get to those topics today. Now, another question that came up last night is there was someone who was asking about when in the previous days we've talked about karma experienced as pleasure and karma experienced as neutral, and then when we're talking about karma experienced as pleasure, there's the discussion of the different types of pleasures that you experience in the form realms. And so for people who haven't studied the Abhidharma, those who weren't in the class, which is the majority of you last year, so those who weren't in last year's class, so that's most of you, you just don't have it. And those of you who were in last year's class, it's probably one point among many, so it's like, I just don't remember it. Or I was confused last year and I'm still confused. So when we have the different types of pleasure that are experienced in the form realms, we've got, in the first level of form, you've got different characteristics, but it has a qualities of pleasure and the faculty of joy. The second jhana, you have the faculty of joy. And in the third jhana, you also have pleasure, the quality of pleasure. Now, the pleasure in the first jhana is kind of a stable pleasure, but it's kind of primarily related to the sensory faculties. It's not necessarily, it's kind of bodily pleasure. So it's classified as pleasure. Then you've also got joy, which is mental pleasure. And that mental pleasure also is in the second jhana. And so in the second jhana, because it's mental pleasure, it's kind of produced by thought. Now, the thoughts of beings in the second jhana, if we were to look at them from our perspective as people in the desire realm, we'd say, wow, that's incredibly stable. But they're actually unstable still, ultimately. They still change, and they're not that, it's kind of in and out a little bit. So the pleasure that happens on the third jhana is different than that, in that it is not based upon thoughts. And so for that reason, it's more stable. And so it's distinguished. It's used. There's a different word that's used for it in the qualities, and we also distinguish it by calling it cognitive pleasure. So it's not really bodily pleasure, but it's definitely not as flighty or as unstable as the mental pleasure. So we call it cognitive pleasure. So for that reason, it's different. So these are the three different qualities. But even that cognitive pleasure is still a little bit coarse compared to the neutral feeling of the fourth jhana. And so on the fourth jhana, even that is given up. Then there was another interesting question that came in via email. And if those of you are wondering where you can send email questions, you can probably send them to the office at the Trangu Monastery here, or you can send them to the Namo Buddha Tibetan web address. I hope that my helper who looks at those emails is, I'm sure she's listening right now, so I'm sorry to send you more work, but that's how it's going to go. At any rate, another question that came in is, basically, looking at karma, we have so many different sentient beings, and it's rather a long question. Let me I have it on here. It's kind of a long question, but basically the question is how to understand how there are so many different types of deluded beings. Why do beings come in so many different forms? And how is it that karma works to do that? And so basically the point here is that we can look out in the world and we can see, even with the limited scope of our own vision, we can see that there are all sorts of sentient beings. Within the human realms, there are great varieties. It goes from, ranges of intelligence, ranges of capacity, different physical appearances, and so forth, all within the range of being human. And yet there's such a great variety of different people. And then you look out at the animals, and you see that we see, and there's just tons of different animals. And so when we look at it, we see that there is this huge variety. So how did it get there? It's kind of a difficult one, but it's kind of, I think the analogy that I would think is if you think about the physical universe as explained by like the Big Bang sort of thing, if we take it out of the Buddhist realm, right, for the moment, but sort of look at it, what we generally learn in secular education is that there was the Big Bang, and then that gradually all that energy or whatever it was condensed into matter, and then that matter then gradually over the course of cause and effect condensed into the worlds, and then all of a sudden there was evolution, and then there are all sorts of sentient beings. So that's kind of looking at it, taking mind and karma out of the occasion, out of the equation. But basically that's saying that everything happens out of causes and conditions. But when you go back and you look at all those different forms of matter, they trace it back all to the Big Bang, and then because it's a singularity, they're not able to trace it back any further. But that doesn't mean that it didn't go back further. And so when we look at this, we also see that there are consciousnesses that come in to the situation. Those consciousnesses are all kind of distinct. Every individual being has its own consciousness, its own stream of consciousness that goes from moment to moment to moment. And how does that work? Well, we can talk about it on a kind of a gross form as the 12 links of interdependence, ignorance, formation, consciousness, etc., etc. And we can see how an individual consciousness goes up. But if you look at even within any one of those links, even that very first link, ignorance, what do we identify ignorance as being? We talk about it as being the 5 aggregates at the moment, or the 5 aggregates when you're basically deciding to do something. It's the afflictions, the afflicted aggregates that are going to motivate an action. And there are so many. You can look at it. I mean, even if you look at your own experience, you would see that when you decide to do things, you have various different motivations. Even if you're talking about doing something relatively mundane from day to day that you do every day you're going to have a slightly different motivation as you do it, even if you do exactly the same thing, whether it's buying a cup of coffee or whether it is brushing your teeth or whatever. Your frame of mind is going to be slightly different even with something mundane like that. And when it comes to actually really consequential actions, then we see that there's a huge variety. Even if you do something like, for example, if you make offerings on your shrine every day, as a lot of Buddhists do, some days you're going to be filled with faith and devotion. Some days you're going to be like, oh, I got to pour out the water in the water bowls. And this is how it goes, because we're ordinary individuals. Of course, we want to be faith and devotion every day, but you got to train yourself to get there. But you see that different days, you have different frames of mind. So even within our own condition, we see that there are different things happening at different moments. And so all of the different permutations and all the infinite numbers of sentient beings lead to there being such a wide variety of sentient beings. Now, as for the question is, why are there infinite sentient beings? That's a very good question. It's a hard one to answer. It's because they existed because they arose out of their previous causes. And why did those arise from their previous causes? It's like there's no beginning. You can't really find a beginning to it. So ultimately saying, why are there so many different beings, is a very difficult question to answer. Another way to look at the question, though, and one that's a little bit more helpful for us to say, okay, we've got a variety of beings, we can see them as they are, but what are we going to do for ourselves to make sure that we're going to go in a good direction from now on? What sort of actions do I need to take? How do I need to protect my mind? How do I need to guard my mind so that I'm going to routinely engage in virtuous actions and give up my bad habits and unvirtuous actions? How am I going to do that? And if we do that, then we are taking a step in the right direction, taking a step towards controlling our minds and actually having a positive influence on our own lives and therefore on the lives of all those whom we can affect. So, Yesterday, so in describing the different types of karmas that we described, we got to talking about the 4 different types of propulsions, and where we left off was speaking about how in all 4 realms there are 4 different propulsions of karma. That is, in any of the realms you can do visibly experienced karma, karma experienced upon birth, karma experienced in other lifetimes, or indefinitely, or karma that is not definitely experienced. You can do any of the 4 in any of your lifetimes. But there's some specifics about that. You can't do that. So that would mean basically that you've got 8 that you could do. You could do the 4 virtuous or the 4 unvirtuous in every lifetime, almost. Not quite every lifetime. So what are those not quites? What are the exceptions? That's what we're speaking about now in the specific. This has 2 topics: how many propulsions there are in the state of birth, and how many propulsions there are in the between state. So in the state of birth it says here, but I think it actually probably means, what it's referring to, describing, is enduring this lifetime, which might be called the prior state. At any rate, there are 3 points. How many there are in the birth state of hell? In hell there are 3 virtuous. So it says there are 3 virtuous propulsions in hell. So in general, there are all 4 propulsions in all realms, but in specific, in hell, there are only 3 virtuous. The good news about this, though, is that in hell, you can actually do virtuous actions. That's the good thing. You have to remember that. Keep that in mind, so that if you actually end up in hell, you can remember that. If you put it in your mind now, make an aspiration. If I am ever born in hell, can I remember that it's actually possible to do virtuous actions? That'll help you a lot. For all beings above was in general, but in specific in hell. While there are 4 non-virtuous propulsions, there are the 3 virtuous karmas of karma experienced on birth, karma experienced in other lifetimes, and indefinitely experienced karma. In other words, there's no visibly experienced virtuous karma in hell. Right? You can only do virtuous actions that will be experienced in other lifetimes. And why is that? There is no visibly experienced virtuous karma because there is no pleasant full ripening in hell. The only full ripenings in hell are unpleasant. I mean, we can think of a few neutral exceptions, but let's not worry about those. Just say it's all unpleasant to make it easy. It's all painful. It's all suffering in hell. All the full ripening of karma. And then how many there are in the birth state of superior ordinary individuals. So it's not just among the hell beings that there are exceptions, it's also for the for superior ordinary individuals, which refers to ordinary individuals who have achieved dhyana or formless meditations. So they're called superior because they're freed of desire from the desire realm, but they're still childish, ordinary individuals. They are like, say, a Hindu yogi, or someone else who's done meditation and achieved this, but hasn't yet entered the noble path and achieved the path of seeing. Okay? So those are the superior ordinary individuals. A child detached stably from a realm does none experienced on birth there. So they're called a child because in comparison to noble individuals, they're childish, as are we. We're all childish individuals, unless you're a noble individual listening. But most of us are childish individuals. So a childish, ordinary individual with sharp faculties. So this means not just someone who's pretty sharp, pretty good meditator, in other words, who is detached stably from a realm. So stable detachment, when you achieve detachment from the realm, again, you've got a range of people, better meditation, worse meditation. Some people say they achieve the first jhana, and they're sharp, they're good, they're definitely free of the first jhana, or of the desire realm. They're on the first jhana. Some are like just making it. And where they're just making it, these are what we call people with dull faculties, and they have the possibility that they're going to regress, that they're going to lose it. There are stories like Devadatta. I think I mentioned this. The Buddha's cousin Devadatta had achieved the first jhana and achieved miraculous powers, but then because he got prideful, he lost it. So the same thing can happen to anyone, really, if you don't have the sharp faculties. So if you are stable, then you are not going to regress. So stably detached from a realm who does not regress in that lifetime does no karma that is experienced on birth there in that level, but does perform the others. So that being, so you achieve, you're sharp, you achieve the first jhana, and you're not going to regress in this lifetime. So from that point on, you will not do any karma that will be experienced on birth in the desire realm. Why? Because you aren't going to be reborn there. You're going to be reborn in the first level of form. Now you could perform action that will be that would be experienced on the second dhyana. For example, you've achieved the stable first dhyana, and you are a go-getter, you want to achieve that next level, you go and you get the second dhyana, then that'll be experienced on your next lifetime, right? So it's the levels that you have already freed yourself from. You will not perform karma experienced on birth there. You might perform karma that would be experienced in other lifetimes if you're an ordinary individual, because you can still, after you're done in the first jhana, you eventually will come back to the desire realm. And so for example, you do here, you achieve the first dhyana, you're stable, but you can do something that is going to ripen in the desire realm in like your third or fourth lifetime, because you may well be back here in that lifetime. Okay? So then we have how many there are in the birth states of nobles. So noble individuals are those beings who have seen the truth, the nature of the Four Noble Truths, and who are on the paths of seeing and meditation. Nobles do none experienced in others, even those not stable toward desire or peak. So nobles who are stably detached from a particular level not only perform no karma experienced on birth in that level, they also do not accumulate karma experienced in other lifetimes, because they will not return to that level. So you've seen the truth of the path of seeing, and then you develop, you've seen the nature of the Four Noble Truths, you've achieved the path of seeing, and then after that you begin to meditate, and you achieve the first jhana. Now, because you are a noble being, you have discarded, you never will get those afflictions for the desire realm back. You've freed yourself entirely of the afflictions for the desire realm, so you're never going to be reborn there again. So you will never do any karma that is either experienced on birth, that is in your next lifetime, because you aren't going to be in the desire realm in your next lifetime, nor are you going to do any karma that will be definitely experienced in other lifetimes, that is your second and the second and future lifetimes, because you won't be born there. You could do indefinitely experienced karma, and you could do visibly experienced karma, but you can't do the two that will be definitely experienced in other lifetimes. Okay, that makes sense? Just because you aren't going to be there. There's no way. You won't be there. It can't be definite because it isn't going to happen. They do perform visibly experienced and indefinitely experienced karma, as I just explained. Even those who are not stably detached from desire and the peak of existence do not perform any karma experienced in birth or other lifetimes, because when they regress from those, they regress from either the result of non-returner or arhat. Okay, so you achieve the path of seeing. Once, as I've said a couple of times, when you achieve the path of seeing, you actually see the Four Noble Truths. It's so obvious that you can't unsee it at that point. You're never going to lose that stable. That is that level. You cannot regress from being a noble being. But you might still be one of the less bright bulbs among the nobles. And so then when you achieve your jhana, you're kind of on one of the lower faculties. You're on that first jhana. So you've achieved the level of non-returner, which is pretty good. That's pretty good, but you're kind of on the lower level of faculties there. And so, well, you regress. Okay. But even though you have regressed, even though your detachment from the level of desire was not stable, you still will not experience the results of those actions, because once you have regressed, if you are a noble being and you regress from either the level of non-returner or arhat, you will restore that before you die. This is as taught in the 6th chapter. So once you achieve arhatship, even if there's some possibility of having a little bit of a lapse in mindfulness, which is, when we're talking about regression for these noble individuals, that's what we're talking about, a lapse in mindfulness. So they kind of regress a little bit. Those afflictions that you're experiencing them are very, very subtle, and you have the habit, and you are already a noble being. You've seen the truths, you've done the meditation, and so it's easier for you to restore them, and you will restore them before you pass away. Regression is an interesting topic that we will have to talk about next year. Okay. So now we have those are the three individuals within the three types of birth. So these are exceptions to the rule that you can basically do any of the propulsions in any of the states. But thus, in terms of in the prior state, after having been born and before dying, well, what about the bardo state? Can you actually propel karma in the bardo state? You die, you haven't taken the next birth. Can you do karma? Yes. And so, this has 2 points, the classifications. There are 22 propulsions in the between state of the desire realm. So in the desire realm, we'd say that there are 22 different levels of propulsion. You can act in the desire realm, and in the between state, and if it's in the desire realm, then there are 22 different alternatives of when it's going to ripen upon you. So so the commentary reads, can karma be propelled in the between state, you ask? The answer is yes. There are 22 propulsions in the between state of the desire realm. Now this is depends on whether there are going to be 22 propulsions or not, depends upon the type of birth you're going to take. Because there are different phases in the life, or different stages in life when they could ripen. So when one will take birth in an egg or from the womb only, in other words, when you're going to follow that progression that we spoke about in the 3rd chapter, from mushiness, the oval, from the oval, the oblong, and so forth, when you're going to go through that stage, then we have a number of different stages that we can go through. If you're taking miraculous birth, you're just miraculously born. So if you're born in hell, there's pretty much only 2 propulsions, in the between state itself and then in hell. But if you're going to be reborn as a human or as an animal that is either viviparous or oviparous, then you would be reborn, then you'd have these 22 propulsions. So there's one propulsion into the between state itself. In other words, you as the between state being do something that is going to be experienced by you in the between state before you take birth. 5 into the periods of the womb explained above. So the 5 in the periods of the womb explained above, and let me get to the note just so I get them correctly. We've got the periods of the womb that says you develop the... where is it? Yes. We've got mushiness, oval, oblong, round, and hands and feet moving. That's 5 different stages, right? So mushiness is like the first stage when you've got the mother's blood and the semen kind of mixing up in the womb. And then oval is it begins to coalesce into oval shape, and then it gets like a little bit longer, then it turns actually solid, and turns round, and hands and feet move. So those are the 5 periods in the womb. And then there are 5 periods in this state, in this lifetime, which would be childhood. This would mean early childhood, youth, prime of life, middle age, and old age. So those are the 5 different times in this lifetime. So you've got 5 in the womb, 5 after birth, 1 in the bardo. That's a total of 11. So if the action that you are doing as a bardo being is going to be definitely experienced There's 11 for that. But you can also do a karma that would be not definitely experienced. And that could be ripened in any of those 11 different stages. So therefore you've got 11 for definite, 11 for indefinite, and 22 total. So 5 into the period, one propulsion in the between state itself, 5 in the periods of the womb explained above, and 5 into the period after birth for a total of 11. By distinguishing between definite and indefinite propulsions, this makes 22 types. In the form realm, there are no propulsions into the womb, because in the form realm you are born miraculously, right? So in the form realm, that would not apply. There would probably only be 2 between state and the form realm, right? If you're being born in hell, there would be 2: the between state and then the period that you're in the hell realm. If you're born from heat and moisture, I don't know. They don't count it out, and I'm not going to start to even think about that. We've got other things we have to cover today. So now here's the question. Are these 22 propulsions, what are they? Are they visibly experienced, experienced upon birth, experienced in other lifetimes, or are they indefinite, not definitely experienced? And so here it said that they are all visible results, proving that the 11 definite are visibly experienced. So these are in the bardo being, so you do something in the bardo state, and it's going to be a visible result. That is within within that lifetime, so to speak. These are a visible result. These are one single likeness only. In other words, as we talked about in the 3rd chapter, the bardo state is propelled by the same karma as is going to take you as your birth. So you're actually in that same class of beings. If you have done karma to be reborn in hell, then when you die in this realm, then you're a hell being in the bardo getting ready to go to the next place. If you've done that karma to be reborn as a god, then when you die in this lifetime, and then until you are actually reborn in the lap of your parents in the desire god realm, in that bardo period, you are in the bardo with the gods, so to speak, right? So these 11 definite propulsions are karma that has a visibly experienced result, because these aggregates at the time of performing the karma and the aggregates at the time of experiencing the result are the continuum of one single likeness only that is propelled by a single karma. So here, that's that point. It's just one karma. So when you, let's take the one that we've been talking about. When you kill your mother, and that's definitely going to be experienced, then then you die. Then your between state, your bardo existence, until you actually take birth. So the bardo existence, as you're kind of chasing, and then you fall headlong into hell, until you actually arrive in hell. That's all bardo states. That's all the bardo state being. It's propelled by the same karma of killing your mother. I should use good examples sometimes. Teaching on karma that will definitely be experienced. This has 3 topics. The first is this general explanation. Then the second is explaining visibly experienced karma in particular. And then third is teaching the other ways karma and result can be experienced. So here, this is a really important topic. How do we know that an action of ours is going to be definitely experienced? When you're doing something, how do you know? How can you tell for yourself when you're doing an action that it is definitely going to be experienced? Well, here it is. An action done out of intense afflictions or sincerity to the field of qualities, or continuously, or killing parents, that is definite. So we've got definite karmas. There are 5 different things that will make a karma definite. So the first is if you do them out of intense afflictions. So if you are totally enraged, it's definitely going to have an experience. For example, once I was at a hotel. We had to go through security to go in. And the person in front of me in the security line was apoplectic because the strap had fallen off of his bag in the security scanner, and he was just about to have a heart attack. He was yelling so loud at the poor person who couldn't do anything because it was an old bag, and he was screaming at her. Intense afflictions. That's going to lead to definite result. Even though it's maybe not that, I mean, it certainly wasn't a pleasant scene, but it didn't actually inflict any actual harm. Or the other one that you can do is intense. So intense afflictions is the first. The second is intense sincerity. So when you feel incredible faith, and you do an action out of just really strong, intense faith and devotion, an intense wish, or maybe it's if you're doing something like prostrating or offering, or if you have an opportunity to truly do something to help someone, and you really feel really sincere about it, and you do it. That, because of the strength of the intention, is definitely going to be experienced. This is something, so the first one, the intense afflictions, is the type of action that we need to avoid. Like when you feel those intense afflictions going on, then your alarm bells should go off. You're going to say, okay, I got to step back. I'm not going to act, because anything I do now is going to be bad, and it's going to be definitely experienced. It's bad. I got to watch myself. When you feel that intense sincerity, intense faith, intense generosity, whatever it is, do it. It's like, excellent, that's when you're supposed to be acting. Because use your brains. Don't necessarily do everything, because if you do something kind of stupid, if you feel intense sincerity in the middle of a teaching and then you rush up and you give the teacher someone's teaching, and then you run up in the middle of the teaching and everyone's looking at you, what they're doing? Come on, this is crazy. So don't make a fool out of yourself. Be within the right bounds, but generally, use your intelligence, but generally, if you're having an intense feeling of sincerity, good faith, and so forth, go for it. Okay. To the field of qualities. Let me read the commentary here, otherwise I'm going to have to go over it twice. How is karma definitely experienced, you ask? A non-virtuous action that is done out of a motivation that is intensely afflicted. Okay, we've been through that. A virtuous action performed with a motivation that is intensely sincere. Okay, that's another. Or the third one is help or harm that may be performed without intense motivation, but is done to the field of qualities. So you do something that's either helpful or harmful, because you can do either. It's up to you. That's where you have to be careful. But you do it to the field of qualities. So again, like I said yesterday, the field means that when you plant karma in that field, in other words, those recipients, then it's going to have a bigger result. It's very fertile ground, shall we say. And this here means the 3 jewels and the 5 individuals who will be explained below. So these come down in just a few in verse 56. But what it basically mean are people who have newly achieved either the result of the path of seeing, or who have newly become arhats, or people who have just arisen from the samadhi of loving kindness, or the unprovocative samadhi, or what's the other one? Cessation. That's right, the absorption of cessation. So someone who's gotten up from those samadhis. Because those are like really powerful states of mind. That's that person who's just come out of that is very fresh. So someone who's just finished the path of seeing and it's new, it's like there, it's like so fresh. After a little while, it doesn't quite have that fresh quality. You haven't unseen the truth, but there's not like that sort of freshness there. Same with the arhat. Okay. and also those virtuous or non-virtuous preparations that are done continuously. And so here it also says preparations. So basically, this is talking about the power of habituation. When there is something that you do continuously, it's going to have a definite result. If you do the same unvirtuous action every day, if your habit is to steal a pair of sunglasses every time you go to the mall, it's a bad habit. You're stealing something, even if a pair of sunglasses is not all that big. It's probably big enough to break the precept, if you have the 5 Li precepts. But at any rate, if you're doing something like that all the time, whatever your secret vice is, basically. If you have a secret vice and you're doing it over and over again, you have to try to stop it, because it will have a definite result, even if it doesn't seem like it is that strong an action. Conversely, when you do something such as making offerings every day, reciting a particular prayer every day, making sure to do a bit of meditation every day, going out every day and giving generosity and so forth every day, then that is also going to have a definite result. So these are the things that have definite results. Or, like the Persians, killing parents with the meritorious intention. So this would be the causal. When they're talking about killing parents, and they're talking about a meritorious intention. So the Persians, so the Zoroastrians' faith started in Persia, of course, but then it also spread along the west coast of India. And even to this day, there are still a few Zoroastrians in the area of Mumbai and that area. I'm not sure how numerous they are, but there are still a few left. There may be quite a lot, I don't know. There are still some, however many there are. At any rate, at the time in ancient times, they were known for having the custom of practicing euthanasia with their parents. And this was in order to save their parents the suffering of aging. So they would build a tower and put mom and dad on the top floor and say, "See you." Now, when we say a meritorious intention here, the other day, this will be clarified later on, the causal motivation is virtuous. The actual motivation at the time has to be, the contemporaneous motivation has to be unvirtuous. But the causal motivation is what we're talking about here. So this is another way you could say is euthanasia, which is, of course, a big topic in Western societies. In Canada, there's a bit of euthanasia, isn't there? So there's a virtuous intention, even though you're not saying, "I hate you, Mom, I'm going to kill you." You're not saying that. You're saying, "Okay, Mom, you've been suffering long enough. Here, have this cocktail." And then, so even that is still going to have a definite result. And it actually, here, when we talk, this will become clearer when we talk about it, but this is also not talking about adoptive parents, it's talking about birth parents, and it's not even talking about surrogate mothers, it's talking about the parents who have given you your, let's put it in modern terms, your genetic material. Those are the parents that we're talking about here. So any of these are definitely experienced. So like Oedipus was, the story of Oedipus. Some of you do, some of you don't. Do people study classics anymore? So Oedipus, when he was born, he was prophesied that he was going to kill his father. So what was it? The father? I haven't looked this up again. This is always dangerous when you don't look up stories. At any rate, he gets sent off from the kingdom, and he doesn't know who his parents are. And he goes back, and he meets this old guy on the road, and he kills him. Well, it turns out it was his father, right? So even Oedipus, now he had no idea that he was killing his father, and yet that still, under this, would be considered killing your father. It still have that same result. And the reason why it's so strong is no matter what our parents have done to us from the time of birth onwards. They have given us the greatest gift that we can have, which is a precious human body. So no matter what else your parents have done, they may have treated you horribly from birth onwards. They might have treated you horribly from before birth, from the time you were in the womb. But they gave you a human body. They gave you an opportunity. And so that is an incredible kindness, and that is the reason why they're considered the field of qualities. So these are the types of actions that are definitely experienced. And so I think the ones that practically we have to think about are the ones that are done with intense motivations. So if it's an afflicted motivation, that's really a sign, hang off, don't do it. And if it's a virtuous motivation, then it's like, yeah, go for it. Then also the other one that I think is really important for us practically is the ones that we do continuously. In other words, those habits. So what this is saying, the way I see this is like, you have to be really careful. Many of us, most of us, in fact, all of us, I'm sure, have bad habits. So we have to do what we can to overcome our bad habits. You can't say to yourself, oh, I'm a horrible person. I'm just because I have a bad habit. You have to do what you can to actually get over it. And this means you have to make the resolution. You have to do this continually. Trungpa Rinpoche is often asked about this, and what you have to do, what Rinpoche always says is there's the slogan from the teachings on mind training, 2 activities, one at the beginning, one at the end. The one activity at the beginning is what? The first thing you wake up in the morning, you say, this is my problem, this is my bad habit, I am not going to do it. That's activity number 1. Activity number 2 is just before you go to bed. How did I do today? You ask yourself, how did I do? Did I do good? Did I do bad? Did I give into that habit? If you gave into your bad habit, you say, it's bad. I've got all this conditioning from all this time, and I need to change it. This is bad. I will not do it tomorrow. Make that resolution. I'm not going to do it tomorrow. If you didn't give into your bad habit, you say, that's good. I'm going to continue doing this. I'm going to try even harder tomorrow. In fact, tomorrow might even be harder because I just might get complacent today. So I'm going to really make the effort to not do it tomorrow. And if you do this over time, it'll work. But it's not going to be overnight because we're ordinary individuals. Okay, so that is definitely experienced karma. So those are the factors that make karma definitely experienced. And then we have the karma that is visibly experienced in particular. And there are 3 parts here. Visibly experienced by the power of the karma, by the power of the action itself. Karma has visible results from excellence of field and of intention. So karma has visibly experienced results from the excellence of the field, such as the Buddha name defeated by quarreling. And I saw the Sanskrit name today, Tripitaka it says. So I'm not sure if it doesn't seem like it's actually the same name, who once called some Sangha members women during an argument and later became a woman in that same lifetime. So this story is actually told very well in the Chim Abhidharma. I'll just read it. It's easier to read it sometime. In a past area, let's see. The master was a son of a wealthy family. I'm not sure if master refers to Vasubandhu or if it refers to someone else. So it's the son of a wealthy family. Usually in this context, it would have referred to Vasubandhu. He developed the mind of awakening to highest enlightenment, that is Bodhichitta. He took ordination and was called Tripitaka. At that time, dispute erupted within the Sangha, and Tripitaka inflamed the dispute. A monk who was a holder of the sutra expelled Tripitaka, so he got kicked out of the Sangha, and the dispute was pacified. Tripitaka then became annoyed and spoke harshly, saying, "You've pacified a dispute among women." And immediately, he became a woman and was reborn 500 times as a woman. So, that's that. It is also from the excellence of intention, like the blind eunuch of King Kanika, who gave a gift that saved 500 bulls from castration and then regained his manhood. I told this story yesterday, but I mangled it. I'm sorry. I hadn't reviewed it before. I just sort of came out without thinking, and as a result of not thinking, it didn't come out right. So the name Kanika actually here in Wangchuk Dorje is given as Kanika. In the Chim Abhidharma, it's given as Kanishka. The auto commentary and Yashomitra do not give the actual name. At any rate, King Kanishka or King Kanika had, he must have had a harem. And when you have a harem, you don't want to have men helping out with the harem because they, you just don't want that. So you have eunuchs. And how do you get eunuchs? You castrate men. So he had, so there was one of the eunuchs who was depressed because he was a eunuch and like his life had been ruined. And he saw someone leading a herd of 500 bulls to be castrated. And he thought to himself, all of my problems started once in a previous lifetime when I had bulls castrated. And then for the next 500 lifetimes, I've been a eunuch. So he bought all 500 of these bulls, and as the visibly experienced result of these, and he set them free, and as the visibly experienced result, he regained his manhood. Okay, so that's that story. Okay. So that's the visible results from excellence of field and intention. So excellence of field is similar to what we described, what I spoke about a moment ago, and we come to that again in a few moments. So we'll get to that later. But basically it's having a really strong or good intention. So the visibly experienced by the power of the antidote from stable detachment from the level when it has definite full ripening. So when you are stably detached from a particular level and you have karma that is definitely going to be experienced, then that karma has to be experienced in this lifetime only. So here it says in the commentary, from stable detachment from the level of desire, another level, when the karma has a definitely experienced result, it is visibly experienced. So this would be, for example, when you have a non-returner or an arhat who makes an offering to the Buddha or the Sangha. So that's definitely experienced, right? That is definitely experienced karma. So it can only ripen in this lifetime. So that arhat or non-returner is going to experience that result in this lifetime. I'm actually using these terms for the 4 stages, or the 4 types of results, and I realize that there might be people who need a review of these. We've got 4 levels of result, right? We've got the stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and arhat. So stream enterers means people who've entered the path of seeing. Once returners means people who will only be reborn in the desire realm one more time before freeing themselves of all attachment to the desire realm. Right? So they aren't quite free of the desire realm, but they're halfway there. Then there are non-returners who have freed themselves from all of the attachments of the fire of the desire realm, and so they're never going to return, so they're non-returners. And arhats means people who have freed themselves from all attachment to any level of existence. So those are the 4 results, right? So non-returners would mean people who are free from attachment to the desire realm, but not necessarily but not all of the other realms. Okay. So what is this karma like? You ask, this is karma whose period is indefinite, but whose full ripening is definite. So this is the karma so if they do something that it could ripen at any time, it's going to have to ripen in this lifetime, but if it's definitely going to ripen. So then there's a question about the distinctions of the field. To help or harm those risen from cessation, unprovocative, love seeing, or arhat's result, bring swiftly experienced results. So here we've got 3 types of meditations and 2 of the results. Excuse me. With the cessation, this is the absorption of cessation that arhats can develop, where they, so it's a very deep type of absorption. We've mentioned this in the past, in the previous chapter. The unprovocative samadhi is one that's talked about in the 8th chapter. The unprovocative samadhi is a type of samadhi where, because of the excellence of the intention, it keeps other beings from having afflictions. So you don't provoke afflictions in any other being because of the power of this samadhi. It's just like being there, you have the strong intention, may not cause anyone to have any afflictions and so forth, and as a result, you don't provoke any affliction. So that's the unprovocative samadhi. Love refers to the samadhi on loving kindness, which is a very powerful, very beneficial type of samadhi. It has a lot of power. So when someone has, so these are the 3 samadhis. So when someone has just come out of those samadhis and they're still kind of glowing from the after effects of just having risen. So if you do something either good or bad to them at that moment while they still have that kind of glow about them, then that's going to have visibly experienced results. Actually, it says definitely experienced on the previous page. They'll have definitely experienced results. Or seeing, the path of seeing. So when you get through the path of seeing, there are the 16 moments of the path of seeing, you've got to the 16th moment, and you're on the path of meditation. You're just there, fresh. You're still glowing too. So doing something to help or harm someone who's just finished those 16 moments of the path of seeing is like really powerful. Also, arhat, the same thing, when you've just attained it. Someone who achieved arhatship, then at that point, you see them, you make offerings, or you do whatever you're going to do, that's going to have a stronger, definite result. Bring swiftly experienced results. So what is karma that is, so I guess it says swiftly experienced, so this is visibly experienced. So this is an interesting question because it's a little bit of a contradiction between what is said in the definitely experienced as to the here. I guess the visibly experienced is definitely experienced, so it's not really a contradiction. Okay. So what is karma that is visibly experienced like, you ask? To give help or bring harm to the Sangha of the Buddha's bhikkhus, or the 5 individuals. So that would mean those who have just risen from the absorption of cessation is like, that is going to nirvana. So this is an arhat. They've just entered this where there's cessation of all mind and mental factors in this very subtle meditation state. And then when they arise from that, so that's the first. Those aroused from the unprovocative samadhi, which I just described, so I don't need to go over it again. Those who have aroused from the samadhi of loving kindness that has the supreme pure intention. So it's a very powerful state again. And those who have arised from the new transformation of abandoning all the discards of seeing, that is the stainless path of seeing. So they have just given up all of the discards. It's new. And they've just transformed themselves. So it's a recent transformation. They've given up all the discards. It's kind of complete. There's this transformation. And that's the path, when they've just arisen from the path of seeing. Or, for aroused from the new transformation of abandoning all the discards of meditation, that is the arhat's result. That is when they first achieve the result of arhat, and they've just transformed. They've just given up all of the discards of meditation, which means they've given up all of everything that needs to be discarded. This brings swiftly experience as a result. So here you might wonder then, well, what about once-returners and non-returners? When you achieve the level of once-returner, or when you achieve the level of non-returners, is there that same benefit to making an offering to that person who's who's just achieved those two levels? The answer is no. And the reason is that others on the path of meditation, that is the once-returners and the non-returners, do not have these causes. So they haven't given up all of the discards of the path of meditation yet. They've given up a few of them. The once-returner has given, it's complicated. For each of the different 9 levels of desire, the 4 form and 4 formless, there are 9 sets of discards, and each of those are the 9 sets of discards. There are discards in each of them, and you have to go through all these periods of meditation. So when you achieve the level of once-returner, it's a milestone, but it's not like the big transformation that you go from being an ordinary individual into being a noble individual through the path of seeing. That's a big transformation. So if you're going from stream enterer to a once returner, there is a transformation, but there is a change, but it's not like a full change. It's just like you're still a few steps, and you've got a lot more discards of meditation to go. You've still got all the rest of desire in the other 8 realms. And for non-returner, you've got all the discards remaining for all the realms that you aren't free of desire. So you've got a long way to go still. So for that reason, it's not as powerful to make an offering or so forth to those individuals. So I think that is enough for our class today. So tomorrow, 2 announcements actually. The first is as I mentioned the other day, the Dharma eBooks has been producing an ebook edition of Jewels from the Treasury, and that ebook edition is now finished. So you can download it from the dharmaebooks.org website. The exact address is in the comments below. So you can in the description below. What is it that all those YouTube presenters, they go like, look below. So, in the address below. I'm on YouTube now, so I got to do that. I'm a personality. I've got, people who are watching me every day. So anyways. So that's the first one. And then the second one is to remind you all that tomorrow is the full moon day of the Sagadawa. So it's an especially good day to gather the accumulation of merit, perform meritorious activities. Everything you do tomorrow will be magnified by, 100 million times? And so it's a very good day to do virtuous things, and in particular to remember the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the qualities of the 3 jewels. To think about those as you go about your day and do virtuous activities. Here at Trungpa Monastery, Canada, we are doing the Kaju Kurtso, the Ocean of Kaju songs, also known in English as the Rain of Wisdom. And so we'll be starting that at 8 in the morning Pacific time for like 3.5 hours, and then in the afternoon from, 1 or 1:30? 1:30? Okay, 1:30 onward. So this will be webcast, so all of you who would like to join us by webcast, then we would love to have you join. As a result of the puja tomorrow, we will not be having any class, so we will resume this class on the day after tomorrow, which is Saturday, I believe. Okay. So now let us please dedicate the merit of teaching and listening to the Dharma to the benefit of all sentient beings, so that they may all be freed of the temporary sufferings that they experience now, the sufferings of strife, the sufferings of illness, the sufferings of poverty, the sufferings of dissatisfaction. And they may all enter the path and soon come to do exactly what the Buddha Shakyamuni did 2,600 years ago tomorrow, and become beacons for all people, all beings in the 3 worlds. O sanam de tam che se pani tomne nye beranam pam chen Kega na chi ba la tro bai si be tso le dro wa dro wa shom. Thank you.